First, I want to ask you some questions, and you don't have to raise your hand to give me an answer, but something you should think about as we go on. First question is, if you can see the PowerPoint over there, the first question is, what do the Rebbe see? Now, first question is, what do you see? I hope you can see the PowerPoint. But the first question on the list is, what do the Rebbe see? A very open-ended question. Okay. So first, let me tell you a story. There are going to be a lot of stories tonight. There's a story with the Maggid. The Messenger Maggid, when the Alt Rebbe was in the years when he was a Talmud by the Messenger Maggid, it happened one day that the Maggid was giving a shiur in the Beis Medrash, and in the middle of the shiur, a young man walked in and stood in the back. And the Alt Rebbe saw him and didn't know who he was. So he turned to the Talmud sitting on his right and said to him, who is that man just walked in standing in the back? So the other Talmud turned around and he says, what do you mean? I don't see anyone. Okay, so the Alt Rebbe turned to the Talmud on his left and said, who's that young man standing in the back that just walked in? So that guy turns around and he looks and he says, I don't know what you're talking about. There's nobody there. So the Alter Rebbe realized that he's seeing something that nobody else sees. So he was quiet until the end of the shiur. Then he went in to see the Maggid personally. And he says to the Maggid, who's that young man standing in the back that walked in the middle of the shiur? The Maggid looks at him, looks up and says to him, yeah, you saw him? Well, if you were zocher to see him, you're zocher for me to tell you who he was. He was the Arizal. He came in to hear what I was talking about because I was quoting the Arizal, and apparently he approved. But what do we see? The Alter Rebbe saw him, the Maggid saw him, and nobody else saw him, but he was there. Fast forward a little bit, and I'll tell you another story. I'm sure you've heard of Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin, Zichrono Livracha. He was a Lubavitcher Chassid, lived in Eretz Yisrael. He wrote a lot of Sfarim. He wrote Sfarim. I was a Talmud in Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan, as they called it, more commonly known as Yeshiva University High School, in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, back in the 1960s. And I saw that Rabbi Zevin's Sfarim were very popular among the Talmidim. He wrote very clear, very well organized, to the point. He wrote Sefer Moadim Ba'alacha was very popular, and also Sefer Hasidim, which was not so popular there, but later years, when I got hold of it, I read it day and night. Well, he was a Lubavitcher Chassid. People didn't know, at least in the yeshiva there, they didn't know that he was a Lubavitcher Chassid. And nobody talked about it. He was a Rav in Eretz Yisrael. Very smart Rav who wrote very good Sfarim. When I came to Chabad, some years later, I found out Rabbi Zevin was a Lubavitcher Chassid. And he even consulted with the Era of Moshiach about how to write Sipur Hasidim and so on. There's stories about that. Well, Rabbi Zevin was an older man. He passed away. Sometime after that, his Rebbetzin came to Yechidus by the Rebbe Moshiach. And she was crying. And she's crying about her husband passing away. She misses him. The Rebbe of Moshiach said to her, "What do you mean? He's standing right there." So she looks and says, "I don't see anybody." And the Rebbe of Moshiach says to her, "Well, that's your deficiency. You can't see him, but he's standing right there." So, again, we're seeing that the Rebbeim see things that we don't see. I'll tell you my own experience. In Motzoi Zos Chanukah, Tavshin Lamed Dalet, my wife and I had just gotten married, and we had Yechidus by the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach. And, of course, I thought I was prepared to answer what I thought were going to be his questions, like what Memorim are you learning, what Chasidus are you learning, stuff like that. Instead, he asked me a question that took me totally by surprise and I had no answer to. He asked me, without looking up at me, just looking down at my paper, he said, "What is your profession?" So thoughts went through my mind at lightning speed. What's my profession? I don't have a profession. I was a graduate student in the University of Minnesota at that time, mathematics. And I had a part-time job as what they call a teaching assistant, which means teaching undergraduate courses. But I didn't know what to tell him. I was also about to start a job teaching part-time at one of the Jewish schools in Twin Cities, Minnesota. I didn't know what to say. Anyway, finally came out of my mouth. I said, I'm a teaching assistant in mathematics at the university. At that point, he suddenly looked up at me and looked straight at me. And you can tell when someone's not looking at you, but not looking at you, right? You can tell. He was looking straight at me, but not at me, stop, but far off into the distance. And he said, to my response, I'm a teaching assistant in mathematics at the university. He looked at me, looking far off, and said, "Where? Here in New York?" That's what he said. This took me even more by surprise, because he knew very well I lived in Minnesota. I had written letters to him from Minnesota and got answers to those letters and so on. Why is he saying that? So I just said, well, I got to go along with question and answer. So I said, no, in Minnesota. So I saw he wrote down on the paper, my pen, Minnesota. But he was right and I was wrong. I was only in Minnesota several more years, and during that time I got more and more involved in teaching Limud Kodesh and less involved in mathematics. Till I came to New York, I got the position, came to New York in the end of 1992. I got the position at Torah College, and I was teaching there for over 20 years. Well, that's what he saw. I even spoke about this at Torah College graduation one time, and you know what I said? I said, there's one thing missing. I said, I was a teaching assistant at the university in mathematics. I said, Torah College is not a university, it's just a college. Well, shortly before I left teaching at Torah, they gained the title of university. Niba v'yoda masha niba. So, have we answered the question? Is what do the Rebbeim see? Question number 2. Are the Rebbeim Nevi'im? Are they Nevi'im? Anyone have an answer to that, by the way? And is that an answer you can back up, or is it an answer that you feel? If it's an answer that you back up, can you tell me where your mucker is? Magid? What?
says that the Alter Rebbe says that I'm not enough. It's not common to me for your physical.
Alter Rebbe says that what?
That it's not common to me for your physical things. It's only enough you can ask them. And it comes from your face.
Very good, very good. Thank you, that's very good. That's a sense of the Chaim. Chaim. Now, I'll tell you a statement. That's the real stuff there. I'll tell you a statement that extends that. I think it's a quote from the Tzemach Tzedek. He said if his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, lived in the time of the Tanoim, no, this was the time of the Achronim, you know. Says, if my grandfather lived in the door of the Tanoim, he would have been considered among the greatest Tanoim. If he lived in the door of the Nevi'im, he would have been considered among the greatest Nevi'im. Okay, that's the Alter Rebbe. Now, the Rebbe Era of Moshiach said many times that every Nossi, every Rebbe is the Mamali Mokom of the Rebbe before him. So that means he has not only the qualities of his predecessor, but his own qualities added to it. Like the Mittel Rebbe had all the qualities of the Alter Rebbe, plus whatever the Mittel Rebbe added. The Tzemach Tzedek had all the qualities of both of them, plus what he added, and so on. You understand? So the Rebbeim were Nevi'im. Plain and poshet. The Alter Rebbe was a Navi. We checked that box. So each of the Rebbeim is a Mamali Mokum of the previous ones. They have the same Milos, the same Koichos, the same Kishronos as the Rebbeim before them, plus what they add. The Rebbeim are Nevi'im. Okay. Next question. Are they alive now? Is Rebbe Era of Moshiach alive now? Well, whatever answer you give to that may be based more on feeling and hergish than on logical proof. So let me tell you a few things. Let's go back to Yaakov Avinu. Everybody knows Pshuto Shel Mikra. Rashi says Yaakov Avinu lo meis. That comes from the Gemara in Tanis. The Gemara in Tanis, it's a whole shaklavataya between two chachamim, and there's even a proof, so to speak. Mazar b'chaim, afu b'chaim. A lot of people have a lot of interpretations of that, and you know, what does that really mean? Best you can say is whatever you want it to mean. However, let's look somewhere else, not just the Gemara and Tanis. There's a Medrash, and Medrash Rabbah. Let me ask you another question as we go along. Yaakov Avinu lo meis, right? We know that means he didn't die. When's the last time you talked to him? He didn't die? Well, you can go talk to him. Anyone talk to him today, yesterday, last week, last night, last year? I submit that you all talked to him today. I see a lot of blank stares. Okay. The Medrash Rabbah, I think it's in Devarim Rabbah, on Pashas Devarim, says, maybe Veschanon, it says Yaakov Avinu lo meis, and it tells the whole story of Yaakov Avinu and his sons. And he said to them, do you still have emunah, like every single one of you? And they all said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And Yaakov Avinu was very happy, and Toda Lakel, he thanked Hashem for that. He said, Baruch Shem Kvod Melchus Olam V'ad. Right? I'm sure you all know that story. But the Medrash goes on. The Medrash says, Ad Hayom Hazeh. Ad Hayom Hazeh. When we say Shema Yisrael, Kriyashma, we are talking to Yaakov Avinu. Otherwise, we could just say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What's the Shema Yisrael for? When we say Shema Yisrael, we're talking to Yaakov Avinu. Hear us, our father Yaakov in Ma'oras HaMachpelah. That's the lesson of the Medrash. Shema Yisrael Avinu b'Ma'oras HaMachpelah. Never mind where he lives. But listen to us. We still are shalem in our emunah. Our emunah is complete, just like when you asked your sons. Now, if you want more detail on that, because you still think it's a matter of this and that, take a look in the Alshich on Parshas Vayechi and Yaakov Avinu Lo Meis. He will give you all the details of details that you ever want. Bekitzer, he says like this. He says, first of all, we know that all tzaddikim b'misosim kruim chayim, all tzaddikim. What's the difference between Yaakov Avinu and any other tzaddik? So he says like this. The neshama, is composed of nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. All tzaddikim, even after they pass away, their nefesh remains in the guf. And that's why they are not called mesim. They are called Yishenei Ofar. Like we say with Danish Monas, or Yomekayim Emunasul Yishenei Ofar. But Yaakov Avinu is special, is Yotzim in a cloud, because by Yaakov Avinu, everything stayed in the guf. The nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida, it all stayed in the guf. It's all still there. Now, some people have asked me when I say this, well, that's not fair. Why do all the other tzaddikim get to go to Gan Eden and Yaakov Avinu? He didn't. He's there in the Ma'oras HaMachpelah, and his whole nefesh ruach neshama chayechida is there in his guf. He doesn't get to go to Gan Eden. Any answer? Well, how about in simple English? He didn't need to go to Gan Eden. Gan Eden came to him. You see, Gan Eden was always with him. You see that when Pashas told us when Yaakov Avinu came in to see his father Yitzchak in connection with the brachos, and Yitzchak was blind at the time, he couldn't see him, but he smelled the reach Gan Eden. It says Gan Eden, the Gemara says this, Gan Eden came in with him. So, never mind Yaakov Avinu going to Gan Eden. Gan Eden was by him the whole time. Okay. Where is this getting us? The Rebbeim, each of the Rebbeim is called a Nasi. You see the Sicha in Vayechi, Toshin, and Beis. The Era of Moshiach brings this and says, Nasi is Rashi Tevos Nitzutzo Shal Avraham Avinu. Shal Yaakov Avinu, sorry. Nun Sin Yud Aleph. Nitzutzo Shal Yaakov Avinu. Okay? And he goes on to say, for those of us who maybe would not understand this at first, Chap. Rebbe Moshiach goes on to say, just like Yaakov Avinu lo meis, also the Friedrich Rebbe lo meis. Because he's a Nasi. So this is true of all the Nasim. And the Rebbe Moshiach is Chayvik Hayom. So when we say Yechi Adonenu Meinu V'Abenu Melech Mashiach Le'olam V'od, everybody should join in with us. Okay, is this the last question? I don't want to go too much past midnight here, but can we talk to the Rebbeim? Well, I guess the answer has to be yes. We say, talk to Yaakov Avinu, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We can talk to the Rebbeim. Will they answer us? Does that happen? Okay, this I'm getting into uncharted territory. All I can tell you is, I mean, I can tell you what happened to me. I can tell you what happened to other people. People have got answers have come into their head. They have a question to ask Rebbe Moshiach, answer comes into their head. Either if it's after they wrote a letter to Igros Kodesh, or sometimes by looking at a picture of the Rebbe Moshiach, or by being by the Ohel. I would say it's different for everybody. But I'll tell you what happened to me the night of, well, first, more easygoing story. I come from Minnesota. I used to work with Moshe Feller, Shlita. He's the head shliach in Minnesota. A lot of times he would send me, like for Purim, up to northern Minnesota to prisons. Like Sandstone Prison was one of them. I think that's a federal prison, I'm not sure. But anyway, I used to go to prisons and visit the Jewish prisoners. We'd get a group together and read the Megillah. And on other occasions too. One Purim, not before Purim, not a week before, not a day before, on Purim afternoon, he calls me up and asks me to drive up to northern Minnesota to visit one of the prisons to read the Megillah for the Jewish prisoners. I told him, I said, I can't do it. I'm just getting ready to sit down to the Purim Suda with my family, and I can't do it this time. And he tried to urge me a little bit, but not too much. And in the end, I said no. On the way back from where the telephone was to where the kitchen was, we had a big picture in the dining room of the Rebbe Moshiach. I looked at that picture, and I saw him looking back at me like with a very unhappy look, like was not happy with what I had just decided. It bothered me, but I said, look, maybe a picture's a picture. Maybe in my mind, I'm just projecting it on the picture, At that moment, my son, a little kid at the time, now he's a menahel in Holy Torah Ramson, but he was a little kid at the time, and he looks at me and he says, Abba, how come the Rebbe's looking at us like he's angry at us? So I said, oh, if he sees it, and then, the Ktanim, then it's real. I mean, because he didn't have my preconceived notion of, what I'm saying. On the night of Gimel Tammuz, Tavshin Nun Dalet, that night, I won't go through the whole thing, but there were notices out on Kingston that read like this: on Gimel Tammuz, we will go to the Ohel. Now, from time to time, there were, by Yom HaPagra, there were notices put up like that. We're going to go to the Ohel this day, whatever. And to daven, they wanted a big tzibur to come there and daven for the Rebbe Moshiach. This was just 8.5 by 11, printed page. It said, on Gimel Tammuz, we will go to the Ohel. But I said, I'm going to go on that trip. So Gimel Tammuz was a Sunday. Motzoi Shabbos. I said, okay, I got to get up early to make the bus to go to the Ohel. I better get something, for breakfast, like, so to speak. I know we don't eat before we go to the Ohel, but we drink. So I said, I'm going to go to that store that closed down there. What was it called? The ice cream shop. And, huh? Dash World. How do you know? That doesn't matter. It's good. It's like, good. At least someone remembers. And I'm going to buy a bottle of milk. So I did. I went there to buy a bottle of milk when I'm waiting line to pay for it. the cashier, who also worked for Hatzalah, started talking to someone, I overheard it, that Rebbe of Moshiach is in serious condition, and they're asking for people to come to 770 now and say Tillim. So I got out of there as fast as I could, and I went to 770 to join the minyan to say Tillim. You wouldn't believe how big the minyan was. It was barely a minyan. People didn't know about it. Nobody heard about it. There's barely anybody there. But there was a minyan saying Tillim. And you remember those Mashiach beepers? No, you don't remember them because they were like cell phones. Okay, they're like the beepers the doctors use. You know that it's a beeper. It beeps, and then a text message comes on, and you can see if someone's trying to get a hold of you or whatever. Anyway, they went out of style when the cell phones came into style. But anyway, the Moshiach beepers was a big thing then, because you'd get a text message from time to time that the Rebbe of Moshiach is out on the porch for Mincha, for Marav, and people start running to 770. So, I didn't have my Moshiach beeper because I ran out of money and I couldn't pay for it anymore. So I didn't have it at that time. So I was saying Tillim with everybody else when all of a sudden the beepers went off. Everybody's beeper went off. Mine didn't because I didn't have one. But I heard from the Ezna Shloshim Lamaila, I didn't even know that there were any women there until then, but I heard them all start shouting and crying and wailing, and I see also the Anash, whoever had a beeper, who in 770, they all like stopped in their tracks, not walking back and forth saying Tillim anymore, but just stopped, frozen. And from that atmosphere, I knew what it said on the beeper. That, putting it together with the Hatzalah guy said, I knew that was, I knew what it said. So in my mind, now just listen to this. I'm just telling you what happened, and you can make of it what you want. In my mind, I asked the Rebbe of Moshiach, is it true? And the answer came back in my mind, no. That was it. From that time on, I'm Yechi guy. Time. Okay. Maybe I better go on to the next thing. I'll try to go a little faster. I know we went over time a little bit. The Gula. Did the Rebbe of Moshiach see the Gula? Yeah? Someone said, of course. Okay. Shall I sing you a song? One of the famous, well-known Lubavitcher Menagnim, I forget his name. His father was the Menachel in Lubavitcher Shiva Crown Street at the time, and he was a singer with a guitar in it. And he came up with a song in English about Moshiach, about Rebbe Melech Moshiach. And there's a few lines from the song. I forgot the whole song except for the few lines that he kept coming back to, the refrain, they call it, in the song. So it goes like this. Something like this. He would not give us false hope, and he would not tell us lies, and he would not have said Moshiach's coming if he had not seen it with his eyes. And on like that. Time again. So he saw it. One more question. January 31st, 1992. Era of Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim. there was a kind of a achroz at the United Nations that the 15 members of what's called the Security Council, not the members themselves, not the representatives, but the heads of state from those 15 nations met at the United Nations. And it's the first time that they ever did that, and I don't think they ever did it again. In other words, not just the ambassador to the United Nations from the United States, but the president of the United States. Not just the ambassador from France, but the president of France. All the presidents, heads of state, met at the United Nations and made a declaration. They're entering a new era where there's going to be cooperation and peacefulness and Ezra Hadodis among the nations of the world, and phasing out wars. Remember that? Now, what if you saw that in the New York Times the next day? Hey, the heads of state declared United Nations, no more wars. What would you think? You'd say baloney, rhetoric, politics, and you turn the page and look for some good advertisements or something. Well, you know who else saw that? The Era of Moshiach saw it. And he said, the next day, he said a whole sikha about it. That's this, Pashas Mishpatim Tavshin and Beis. And you know what he said about it? He said, this is the beginning of the Nevuah of Yeshayahu. I think you got to go a few slides ahead now, whoever is there by the machine. This is the beginning of the fulfillment of the Nevuah of Yeshayahu. No, before that, a little bit before. Yeah, that's where we're holding now. I can send you a copy, anyone who wants a copy of that PowerPoint, but it's okay. If you can read it, if you can see it, like we said before. So the Rebbe Moshiach said that that's the beginning of the fulfillment of the Nevuah of Yeshayahu, of V'chitzu Chavosam L'Itim, V'chanisosem L'Mazmeros, that the Goyim will beat their swords into plowshares. That is the beginning of the Nevuah. And the whole Sikha is about that. So he saw in that event something that nobody else could have seen, even the people who made the declaration. Even, fast forwarding to our time, the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, it's gone on forever, right? So I think after it was going on for a year, in September 20-something, Putin met with Modi. Modi is the Prime Minister of India. And they were friendly, politically anyway. And Modi said to Putin, listen, stop the war. Said to him like this, he said to him, he said, this era is not an era of warfare. I always wondered how he knew that. It was from the Achroz at the United Nations, maybe it was from the Shluchim in India. I don't know. But that's what he said to him. He says, even the Goyim, the whole Nevuah V'chitz Chavosam L'Itim is about the Goyim. It's not about the Yidden. It's about the nations fighting each other, and they'll stop fighting each other. So I wrote a book about this. I think that book is here. I think I brought a copy last year and gave it to the yeshiva. Is that correct? And as I was writing that book, like at the end of writing the last sections, that's when a lot of these wars broke out from Ukraine and Russia. Otherwise, U.S. and China, they're not fighting a physical war, but they're fighting an economic war, which is the Chinese derech, l'chatchila. You see that also in my book. But anyway, I wrote about these wars that were starting in Ukraine and Russia in particular, that was going on too long. And I said the best I could about it. And then quickly I got the book off to the publisher before the war went on any longer, and I didn't want to have to write any more about it because I don't know what's going on there. Wait. Here comes the punchline of the whole. These are called forever wars. That's the common word in the news media for these wars that go on, and they try to negotiate and try to make settlements, and they talk to Trump, and Trump talks to them. And Putin, by the way, has learned how to play Trump, He tells them, yes, I want to make peace, and then the next night he goes and bombs Ukraine more than ever before. And Trump says, well, give him another month, another whatever. And Kol Shikalam, if you know what that means. That's Arabic. The only reason I know it is because there's a Yid Israeli who made a song about that. Kol Shikalam means it's all talk. It's nothing. No tochen, no substance. It's a forever war. And it's still going on. And Russia and China, America and China, it's still going on. And China's still threatening to invade Taiwan and all that. That's not what's supposed to be happening now. It's supposed to be the era of swords into plowshares. It's supposed to be like it was the first 25 years or so, getting more and more peaceful, nations turning their technology away from military to peaceful uses and to medical uses and stuff like that. And there was a lot of that, and I document that in the book. The soldiers doing, directing traffic or whatever, that were not being used for war. Money, tons of money was put into military. It was transferred to peaceful uses. Now they got to put it back to military. What's going on? So I think like everybody else, I was confused about this. I didn't know for a long time. But finally I said, this was recently, I said to myself, look, this is every nevuah, the Rebbe of Moshiach did not say that the nevuah of Yeshayahu was fulfilled. He did not say that. He said, this is on page 2 in the Sikha. In italics, where is it? Over here. Hareze Simun Borer al Hatcholas Kiyumo Shel Yud Zeh. This is a clear simon, in other words, this United Nations Declaration, and the beginning of the fulfillment of this Yud, Begula Mitzvah Shlema. Now, the beginning of the fulfillment of this Yud is emphasizing that it is not the complete fulfillment yet. It's the beginning. And as we know, for all events, all developments in the world have ups and downs. So for a while I think, well, maybe this is just going down a little bit, but it's going on too long. So finally, I came up, Lanier Stati, with the following understanding. The following understanding of the Sikha. Okay. There's something in this Sikha, this is the Sikha, that I learn the Sikha every year. Okay. I live with it. I live by it. I live with it. Whatever. What's the right way to say that? I live with it. And there's something that I always wondered about. Okay, on the first page of the Sikh, the Rebbe of Moshiach says what happened at the United Nations, and then he goes on to say, "Mei haYehudim the shel gula mitzvah shlema al dei Mashiach Tzidkenu is b'nogel b'shayachos l'anhagas umos ha'olam is v'chitzu chavos al militim v'chanisusem l'mazmeres lo'isek al gerchev v'lo'yil b'dol muchama." Okay, he says it's the beginning of the Qiyum of this nevuah. Now, the next paragraph in the Sikha, you can look this up, is a long paragraph. And he says, Get that. We know is Melech HaMashiach. We know, and now he's saying that this V'chitzu Chavosam Itim is going to be a direct accomplishment of Melech HaMashiach himself. So, apparently, there are things that the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach did with the nations of the world to bring them to this state of the V'chitzu Chavosam Itim, to declare swords into plowshares. And I thought, and everyone else I know thought, for a long time, that this is probably the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach campaign that went throughout the world. It did go throughout the world, up to the United States Congress, up to even journalists in Russia, believe it or not. So I don't have the details on that now, but I remember it in its time. There are shluchim, Chabad shluchim, who they have a prayer in Congress every year or something, opening sessions. And on occasion it was the Lubavitch Shluchim, and they would mention the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. And in Russia, there was a journalist, I don't even think it was a Jewish journalist, who wrote in the Pravda, the official communist Russian paper, that about the Melech HaMashiach's program for the nations of the world, Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. Well, but here's something I wondered about. Okay, so this is going to happen by Melech HaMashiach, and that has to be said, because in the Nevuah of Yeshayahu, it doesn't say who's going to do it. So here's the thing. The Pasuk says, V'shafat ben hagoyim v'ochiach l'amim rabim, and then, in parentheses, the Melech HaMashiach brings the Radak. The Radak says, Hashofet hu Melech HaMashiach sheyehei adon kol ha'amim. Right? So that's the proof that it's going to be a direct accomplishment of Melech HaMashiach, that Radak. But then the Melech HaMashiach goes on to quote the whole long Radak and bring in psukim from the Nevuah all the way to the end of the paragraph. And every time I ever read the Sikha, I wondered, what is that for? What do we need that for? All we need is to say that the Radak says, Ashovitu Melech HaMashiach. And that explains that V'shafat Beinu Amim. What do we need that whole arichos from the Radak for? So when I started to think, there must be some role that these wars, these forever wars, play in the Gilui of Mashiach. It's not just derech hagav, it's not by accident. These wars are here for a purpose, on purpose and for a purpose. What is that purpose? So I went back to the Sikha. We have to open our eyes. It's possible to read the Sikha 100 times and not notice something. Have to open our eyes. Sometimes that means a deeper, more careful reading, a deeper insight. And the first place I looked really was this long Radak that I thought doesn't even belong here. But look what the Radak says. He says, Hashofet hu Melech HaMashiach, sheyehei adon kol ha'amim, v'hu yochiach lehem, v'yomer lemi sheyim. I have it on one of these, it's over there on that screen. Sheyehei adon kol ha'amim, v'hu yochiach lehem, v'yomer lemi sheyimotzi bo ha'ovel, yasher ha'me'uvos, u'mipnei Zelle lo tia milchama ben am la'am, ki hu yashlim beinehem, so he's going through the whole development from the beginning of the Nevuah of how the nations of the world are affected by Mashiach, and then they beat their swords into plowshares. The Rebbe Mashiach, however, continues the paragraph, again quoting psukim from the Nevuah. Shekain bachris hayomim nochon yeh harbeis Hashem gomer v'noharu elov kol hagoyim v'holcho amim rabim. The nations will flow to the Har Hashem, to Melech HaMashiach. V'holcho amim rabim. Many nations will go v'armiluchu v'nal el Har Hashem el beis Elokei Yaakov. Let's go up to Har Hashem, to the house of Elokei Yaakov, it's where the base of Mikdash is. And we'll follow his instructions. He'll tell us his instructions and we'll follow his ways. I think that explains the whole thing. Because these forever wars have a place in the Gilui of Moshiach. Hagatzmacha. Imagine, let your mind wander for a second. Imagine the following happening in the world. We have the Gilui of Mashiach. The Rebbe of Mashiach is Miskala, come back to 770. 770 goes to Yerushalayim to Har HaBayis, right? That's what's supposed to go to the space of Benishim Bavel. It goes to Har HaBayis, becomes connected to the base of Migdash Hashlishi. And Melech HaMashiach is there, and he's set up there, and it's part of the base of Migdash. And the wars are still going on between Russia and Ukraine, the forever wars. Because this is going to, that's what some take of me al mamash. And the wars in Russia and Ukraine, who knows? They're forever wars, which that's what they're called on the news. Wars that go on forever. Wars that are expected to go on forever. So Trump calls up Putin and Zelensky one day. Hello, Vladimir. Who is he talking to? Vladimir. Huh? Trump. Who's he calling? Vladimir? Who's he calling? No. Huh? Both. They're both called Vladimir. That's just a little joke there. So Vladimir 1, Vladimir 2 says, listen guys, this war is going to go on forever. What do you say? Look, what do you say? Trump says to them, let's go up and ask the Rebbe Moshiach and Har Hashem and the mountain of God. Let's ask them what to do. Let's ask them how to resolve this and make everybody happy. And we'll do what he says. And so on. President Xi can call up, what's this guy there, Trump, if he's still president, and says, and say to him, Donald, what do you say? We're never going to get anywhere with this. A forever war, competition go on forever. What do you say we go up to the mountain of Hashem and Mashiach will tell us what to do and we'll do it. That's it. All the wars are resolved. All the conflicts are resolved. Everybody's happy. And the Gula is complete.